Snow was falling softly outside the hospital window when a nurse quietly wheeled out the twin girls, born too early, too small, their tiny bodies curled like unopened blossoms. Their mother lay unconscious, drained from a brutal labor. There was no milk, no father, not even $1 to buy a bottle, and no one was waiting outside to welcome them into the world. But then, something small happened. A nurse placed a single bottle of donated milk into the incubator, with a handwritten note that read, "For whoever needs it most today." It seemed like a passing act of kindness, just one drop in the ocean, but no one knew then that 25 years later, those same twins would return to this very hospital, not to receive help, but to offer it, not to be fed, but to feed thousands. If you believe in miracles born from quiet generosity, then the story of Ava and Lily will stay with you long after this video ends. The hospital ward in Easton Ridge was never meant for miracles. It was old, underfunded, and worn at the edges, just like most things in the forgotten corner of town. But on that icy December morning, it became a cradle of hope. Ava and Lily entered the world too soon, too fragile. Their mother, Joanne, had gone into labor alone in her apartment, barely making it to the emergency room. She was 22, abandoned by the father of her children. She worked nights cleaning offices and lived on expired canned food from donation shelves. When the nurses rushed the babies away, her last words before slipping under anesthesia were, "Please, just feed them." But there was no formula stock for premature twins, no breast milk to be pumped. The hospital staff scrambled, calling the local milk bank, but no deliveries were expected for another 2 days. Then came Nurse Meredith. She was quiet, gray-haired, always keeping to herself. But that morning, she did something no one forgot. She reached into the back fridge of the neonatal unit and pulled out a single 3-ounce bottle labeled "Donated Tuesday." It had been anonymously dropped off by a mother who once lost a child but kept donating in her name. Meredith placed it in the warmer, then slipped a folded note underneath it. "For whoever needs it most today." No one spoke much. There wasn't enough time. The first drops of milk reached Ava's lips, then Lily's. They shared that bottle, alternating every few milliliters, connected by hunger and survival. That night, Meredith sat beside the incubator long after her shift ended, watching the twins' heart rates steady. She whispered to them stories they wouldn't remember, about strength, about love, about how sometimes the world gives you just enough to start with. The next morning, more milk arrived. Donors from across the city responded after the hospital quietly put out a call. Volunteers, anonymous names. One woman rode 2 buses just to drop off 2 tiny bags. In the weeks that followed, Ava and Lily gained weight slowly. Their mother, still pale and trembling, would press her forehead against the incubator glass and mouth, "Thank you," to the nurses on the other side. She didn't know who to thank first. She never would. But Ava and Lily would. Because even though they were too young to remember those days, something stayed inside them. A memory passed not through words, but through need, through the warmth of a drop of milk, through the gaze of their mother, who gave them everything she didn't have. And though they left that hospital after 47 days in NICU, it never left them. Joanne brought her daughters home wrapped in blankets donated by the maternity ward. The apartment was cold. Heat barely worked. Windows rattled when the wind passed through, and the fridge held more air than food. But the girls were home. She slept on the floor beside their crib made of secondhand wood and layered towels. Every feeding was a question mark. Where would the next bottle come from? Sometimes she stretched formula with water. Sometimes she went without food herself. But neighbors, once silent, began noticing. Mrs. Helms from 3B started leaving small bags outside Joanne's door. A can of soup, a packet of rice, once, a pair of tiny socks. Joanne never asked, and the neighbors never knocked. But word had spread. Those twins were fighters. By the time Ava and Lily turned 2, they could recognize the sound of coins dropping into jars. Joanne worked double shifts, scrubbing office floors and cleaning motel rooms on weekends. Every penny she saved, She dropped into two glass jars on top of the kitchen shelf. On the outside of each jar, a name was written in marker, Ava's college and Lily's college. They asked once, "What's college?" Joanne smiled, brushing their hair behind their ears. "It's the place you'll go so you can come back and build a better world than this one." And so, the girls grew, not on riches, but on rituals. Saturday was library day, where they'd curl up in the children's section until closing time. Sunday meant one warm meal with candles, even if it was just instant noodles. Every bedtime ended with a story, not from books, but from Joanne's memory, of how strangers saved their lives, of how borrowed milk became the reason they lived. When Ava scraped her knee, Joanne would kneel and say, "It hurts now, but pain is how we remember we're alive." When Lily cried because she had no lunchbox like the other kids, Joanne whispered, "You don't need a fancy box to feed someone's heart." By fifth grade, Ava was explaining science to classmates. Lily was sketching out diagrams of imaginary hospitals with sliding doors and sunlit waiting rooms. They both knew what they wanted before they knew how to get there. They wanted to heal people, not because they read it in a book, but because their first chance at life came from healing hands. Joanne never remarried, never took vacations, but every time she dropped another coin in the jar, she believed her girls would be the kind of women who would return to the places most people forgot and leave behind something no one could ignore. Ava and Lily were inseparable through high school, two halves of the same storm, quiet but burning with something fierce underneath. They studied by candlelight during power outages, took turns on the family's only hand-me-down laptop, and shared one prepaid cell phone between them. But neither of them ever complained. Not once. Their mother's dreams became their blueprint. The jars marked college remained on the shelf, dusty but sacred. And then, during the spring of senior year, everything nearly fell apart. Joanne collapsed at work. She was cleaning the 13th floor of an office building when her vision blurred. By the time paramedics arrived, her blood pressure had dropped dangerously low. Ava and Lily found her unconscious in the ICU. Ironically, the very same hospital where they had once fought for life. Joanne was diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune disease that had gone unnoticed for years. The doctors said that if she had come in earlier, it could have been managed with medication. But Joanne hadn't. She couldn't afford regular checkups. She didn't have insurance. The irony cut deeper than any blade. The woman who gave everything so her daughters could survive had nearly died, because no one was there to help her survive. Lily sat outside the hospital room that night and said, "We're going to change this." Ava, her voice hoarse from holding in her tears, answered, "Not just for her, for every mother like her." And from that moment, their path was no longer just about escaping poverty. It became a vow, a blood promise. They would become doctors. They would open clinics. They would never let someone like their mother go untreated again. When Joanne woke up, she tried to apologize for being a burden, but Ava leaned in close, touched her hand, and said, "You're not the reason we're behind. You're the reason we've come this far." With a loan, 2 scholarships, and part-time jobs, one delivering groceries, the other tutoring biology, they got into med school together. Ava chose internal medicine, Lily, family health. They graduated side by side, wearing matching white coats and holding hands like they did when they first learned to walk. But they never forgot the smell of bleach on their mother's hands, the sound of coins in the jar, the warmth of one bottle of donated milk. And they knew this wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning of something greater. The building was nothing more than a rundown laundromat in the corner of a forgotten block in Easton Ridge. Peeling paint, broken tiles, and a roof that wept every time it rained. But to Ava and Lily, it looked like redemption. They spent 6 months saving every extra dollar, skipping luxuries, working night shifts at local hospitals while negotiating with property owners, hunting down permits, writing grant proposals, and convincing one retired plumber to fix the pipes for free when he heard their story. They named it the Quiet Start Clinic, inspired by the bottle that once saved them in silence. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no television crews, Just a small handwritten sign taped to the door. Free walk-in health services. No insurance needed. No questions asked. The first patient was a woman in her 50s. She limped in with a swollen ankle and eyes that didn't dare hope. "Is this free?" she asked. "Yes," Ava said, helping her onto the chair. "You're exactly who we're here for." By the end of that month, the clinic had treated 189 patients, children with untreated fevers, elderly men with uncontrolled diabetes, and mothers who hadn't seen a doctor in years. Many of them walked for miles to get there. Some just came to sit and cry. Others donated what little they had, a sack of rice, a bundle of fresh herbs from the garden, a knitted scarf. The walls slowly began to fill with letters. "You helped my son walk again. I didn't think anyone cared. You made me feel human." Joanne, still frail but proud, volunteered at the reception desk. Every time a new patient arrived, she smiled and offered water and a warm towel. Her daughters told her she didn't need to do anything, but she insisted. "I fed you when I had nothing," she said one evening, looking around the waiting room packed with people. "Now let me feed this place." News traveled faster than they imagined. A local journalist ran a quiet piece about two doctors opening a free clinic in the very neighborhood where they were born. Sustained by milk that wasn't even theirs. That article went viral. Donations poured in, nurses volunteered, retired doctors offered to mentor or work weekend shifts. Someone from a foundation left an envelope with a typed note. "I was born to a teenage mother. 2. Use this to open another clinic." Inside was a check for $75. $1,000. And just like that, one laundromat clinic turned into 3, then 5. Every one of them bore the same name, The Quiet Start, and in everyone. Behind the front desk, a single glass bottle sat on display, empty but powerful. It reminded everyone who walked in that even the smallest act of kindness could echo for generations. One rainy afternoon, Ava stood near the window of the flagship Quiet Start clinic, watching puddles gather in the street just like they did the night she was born. Patients were already lined up despite the weather, some with umbrellas, others wrapped in plastic bags or coats too thin for the season. Inside, Lily was in the pediatric room, gently checking the breathing of a boy with a wheezy chest. His mother looked exhausted, holding a damp backpack and clinging to the edge of the exam table with one hand. Ava stepped in quietly and offered her a seat. "Have you eaten today?" she asked. The woman shook her head. "I had to choose between lunch and the bus fare." Ava didn't say anything. She just walked out, returned with a sandwich and a bottle of milk from the staff kitchen, and handed them to her. The woman's eyes filled with tears, not because of the food, but because she knew what it meant to be seen. Later that evening, as they were locking up, a nurse came rushing toward Ava and Lily. "There's someone here to see you both. She says, she donated milk here once, decades ago." They exchanged stunned glances and followed the nurse to the front desk. There stood an older woman, silver-haired, hands shaking as she pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket. I don't know if this means anything anymore," she said, "but I gave milk once. After I lost my daughter, they never told me where it went." Ava took the paper gently. It was a copy of a donation receipt, dated 25 years ago. Tuesday, the same Tuesday, Lily's voice cracked. "I think we were the babies." The woman broke down right there in the clinic lobby, and so did they. They brought her inside, sat with her for hours, listened to her story. She had never had more children. She thought her milk had gone to waste, but instead, it had built clinics, healed thousands, saved lives. Before she left that night, she walked past the glass display bottle near the reception desk. She touched it softly, whispered something only the twins heard. "You were never mine, but I loved you anyway." Ava and Lily watched her go, arm in arm, knowing that life had finally come full circle. The woman who gave them life in one quiet gesture had been given something back, even if it had taken decades to arrive. And for the first time in years, the twins realized something. They hadn't just built clinics. They had built a home for every broken story that never got a proper ending. Years passed, and the clinics multiplied, not like franchises, but like seeds that bloomed where the soil was most cracked. Quiet start centers opened in rural towns, inner city neighborhoods, even on repurposed buses that could drive to migrant camps and shelters. Each one carried no slogan, no flashy branding, just a promise. Come as you are, leave better. Ava and Lily refused to be called heroes. They insisted they were just returning what had once been lent. In interviews, they never spoke of wealth. Though donations grew, they spoke instead of Joanne's hands. Cracked and raw from cleaning floors, they spoke of neighbors who left groceries at their door without a name. And most of all, they spoke of a single bottle of milk, dropped off by a grieving mother who had no idea she was pouring life into two strangers. Quiet Start wasn't just about medicine anymore. It became a place where dignity was restored, where someone held your hand while you waited, where teenagers who'd once been treated came back to volunteer, saying, "This place saved my mom." Joanne passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by her daughters and the sound of laughter from a clinic event happening just outside. Her ashes were placed in a small garden courtyard behind the original clinic, beside a tree planted in her honor. They called it Mother's Tree. Every spring, the petals bloomed pale pink, like the blankets Ava and Lily were first wrapped in. One day, during a university commencement ceremony, the twins were asked to give the closing speech. They stood on a stage before thousands of graduates, holding each other's hands like they always did. Lily looked out at the sea of faces and said, "We were once fed by strangers, raised by kindness, saved by people we'll never meet. So we made a choice, not to be successful, but to be useful." Ava continued, her voice steady. "And if you remember anything from today, let it be this. You don't need to have everything to change everything. Sometimes, the smallest act, a drop of milk, a coin in a jar, a quiet hand on a fevered forehead it's all it takes to rewrite someone's future." The crowd rose in a standing ovation, but in the front row, the applause came most quietly, from a line of nurses, janitors, volunteers, and former patients, the real audience. Because this wasn't just a story about two girls who rose from poverty. It was about all the unseen hands that lifted them, and all the hands they would go on to lift. And so, the legacy continued, etched not in headlines, but in the soft hush of waiting rooms, the rustle of donated blankets, the steady breath of a child being healed, because the world hadn't given up on Ava and Lily, and they had decided, long ago, never to give up on the world. Not every legacy is carved in stone. Some are poured, drop by drop, into a tiny bottle left in silence. Some are raised not by wealth, but by love that never asked for anything in return. Ava and Lily were never meant to be remembered because of fame or fortune. They were meant to remember, and because they did, others now live. So if this story touched something in you, hold on to it. Maybe it's not about building clinics. Maybe it's about the bag of groceries you leave on someone's doorstep, the extra meal you share, the kindness you offer when no one's watching. Because the truth is, you never know when your quiet gift might become someone else's beginning. Thank you for watching. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, we invite you to subscribe and help us share more of them with the world.